Hello. So this is my presentation, Nuisance Aquatic Vegetation in Texas. I'm just going to be exploring invasive nuisance aquatic species that are invading Texas, their problems, and some solutions. The main problem is the overabundance of certain aquatic plants in Texas waterways, which cause a plethora of environmental and economic strains. So as we'll look at these species when they grow too much, they affect the environment as well as the economy. So worth noting is the term nuisance means to cause inconvenience. So I think it's a little bit more than inconvenience, but that's what these plants are labeled. So, but they can really cause serious harm to ecosystems, and that's what we're going to be looking at. So mostly occurs when invasive species or exotic species are involved. So these are species that aren't native to America, but they thrive very well in America, which obviously presents a problem. It doesn't always have to be, as we'll see. There can be some native species as well, but it's mostly invasive. The Texas Parks and Wildlife Department is the leader in monitoring and resolving this issue. So this is where most of my research is going to come from, mainly just because they're the most funded, they're the most knowledgeable on this topic, and they've said a lot of good things pertaining to what's going on, how they're resolving the issues, and I just found it really a really helpful resource. But I did want to explain invasive a little bit. I remembered from chapter 5.5 of Principles of Environmental Science. Invasive species are organisms that thrive in new territory. These species also are part of E.O. Wilson's hippo analogy that lays the outline for how extinction typically becomes the fate of a species. So like I said earlier, they thrive in a new territory. Same with these aquatic species. And it really lead to extinction. So if we just let these go and we let invasive species take over, we're gonna see the extinction of a lot of species that we love and that we want, and it's just gonna be filled with these invasive species if we're not careful. So I want to lay that out there. So really just getting into the problem. Vegetation is not the problem. I want to make that clear. Vegetation is actually good for water or for water ecosystems rather. It's largely beneficial to animal life in an aquatic ecosystem, providing food, shelter, and oxygen. So we want vegetation in our lakes and our ponds, but it's too much vegetation that's the problem. And it's really just like that saying, too much of a good thing is a bad thing, kind of applies here. So as stated by Earl Chilton, PhD and member of Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, too much vegetation can affect recreational activities as well as hinder water movement, affect fish populations, and in some cases, reduce water quality. So as far as recreational, it's really going to, affect everything as far as boating, fishing, swimming, um, but then really environmentally as well. It can kill off fish populations. It can slow down the water. It can reduce the water quality for drinking water. So it's really just a all around problem. I really like this image. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I can't really point to the screen. But it says protect your boat and Texas waters. So just protect. It really just sums up the 2 points. The simple statement sums up two truths about nuisance aquatic vegetation. So number one, it largely alters recreational activities, boating, fishing, and swimming, and therefore is economically harmful. As you have to get boater's license, you have to get fishing license. These are things that bring money to a not habitat, money to a environment, to a culture almost. And so entire towns form around lakes, right? Lake Worth, like there's towns that form around the lakes because it brings in visitors, it brings in money, and it's a great attraction. So economically, it's very bad to have these plants in your waters because people, their boats are gonna get messed up if they're trying to go through there, and they're not gonna want to fish, not gonna want to swim in there. So but furthermore, it affects aquatic ecosystem by harming fish populations, water movement, and water quality. And harming the fish population actually ties back into economic as well. So, but yeah, protect your boat and Texas waters. And also, if we look back here, these are the three species that I kind of point out the most, as we'll get into that. But common Salvinia hydrilla and water hyacinth are the main species that um, are hindering Texas right now. So what, who, and where? What causes nuisance aquatic vegetation? So the introduction of a quick spreading aquatic plant species is really what's going to cause this. Such plants that have invaded Texas waterways are hydrilla, water hyacinth, and giant salvinia, as mentioned in the previous slide. Algal blooms could also be included. So algal blooms are not so much a foreign species, but they also can cause, they can take the nutrients from other plants. So who is involved in this spreading? as with many environmental issues, humans are the culprit for this issue, specifically people who bring boats to different lakes and ponds. So sadly, but the reality is humans cause most environmental issues that we have. But the cool thing is we can also be the ones to solve them. So, but yeah, we really do bring these species around with boats, and people forget to clean off their boats. Plants can be tangled in propellers or on the bilge of a boat. Bilge is just the bottom of a boat. So, if we bring these plants from place to place, we're acting as their transporter, and from there they take grains. Once you get these plants in water, they're just going to spread and multiply very quickly. The plants were likely brought to America for use in aquariums or water gardens, and so they were brought for a good reason. They look cool. They like the plants. They wanted to trade them, buy them, but somehow, in some way or other, they got into our water systems and they spread very rapidly. So, where is nuisance aquatic vegetation a concern? It's truly a statewide problem because there's lakes across much of the state, and boating and fishing are among the top activities for the average Texan. I see it all the time just driving on the highway. There's boats on the back of trucks. It's very common. So the problem is greater in East Texas, as the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department reports findings of Salvinia in 25 East Texas lakes. And so that's most of Salvinia is going to be in East Texas because most of the lakes are in East Texas. And it's definitely more of a Southeast Texas kind of thing. But there's lakes everywhere and there's aquatic ecosystems everywhere. So this is really a statewide problem. Clearly invasive species have no preference towards public or private waters. But the cool thing is the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department has outlines for management in each sector. So obviously private waters are owned by people, and so but those are just as necessary as the public ones to get rid of this problem. And so there's outlines for how to manage each one as far as um, permits you have to get, things you have to do to be safe and to get rid of these aquatic organisms. So this slide I just included just for some, further information. The picture here, warning, the water contains giant salvinia. This is part of the funding that is going in with the Texas Parks and Wildlife is they're really funding these signs being put up because education is just as big as anything else. People have to know that this is a problem before they actually solve the problem, right? And so giant salvinia is a big problem it's really the main problem, honestly. And so putting these signs up is a big part of it. And then the map of Texas I just included just to show like the waterways in Texas, lakes and rivers. It is primarily in the east, if you'll see, but there's water throughout. And so anywhere there's water, I feel like it could be a problem because people are boating on all these lakes. So I call this slide Texas tyrants. So it kind of goes together. But the reason I call it Texas tyrants is because the word tyrant means like one who takes control by force, right? Think of just leaders who took control by force. And it just reminded me of what these plants do. Like they spread rapidly. No one really invites them in, but they just take over. So first, giant salvinia. This is the most harmful aquatic plant in Texas. It's not. I don't know where I was going with that, but it's the most harmful aquatic plant in Texas. So it spreads rapidly, and it creates like a carpet over the water. So it's an aquatic fern, and it's native to southern Brazil. Then we have water hyacinth. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Um, it's beautiful, but as the Bible says, beauty is vain, and it's really just equally as harmful as these other plants. It forms a dense sunblocking colony, and so it's going to take all the nutrients that the plants underneath would take, and it's going to kill those off. And so, yes, it's beautiful, but it's very harmful. So, free floating hydrophyte. It's native to South America as well. And then we have hydrilla. It can grow in any freshwater system. It's a perennial herb, usually rooted. So that's the difference with this one. It's usually rooted in the ground and then grows up, but it can also be free floating. And this one's native to India. So what do we notice with these Texas tyrants, as I call them? They're none of them from America, right? These were all imported, mostly through the trade, and have made their way into our water systems. So into my peer review research, the article I discovered is called New County Records in Texas for the Invasive Aquatic Plant, Hygrophila polysperma. So published by the Journal of the Botanical Research Institute of Texas in 2019. 2019 is not too far away from current time. So this problem is very ongoing and it's being studied right now. So it's cool. This invasive plant was not among my list of Texas tyrants, but it's very similar to hydrilla in that it's usually rooted. And like all my examples, it's foreign and it's an invasive species. So this is not included among the top invasive species, but it is one of them, and it shares a lot of the same characteristics. So I thought it was a really good article to pull up. Some findings that I found in my article. It reveals that Hygrophila polysperma was intentionally introduced between 1950 and 1980 by aquatic plant nurseries operating the San Marcos River for propagation and collection for the aquarium trade. And so, like I said earlier, they brought these plants in for the trade for the aquarium, and somehow they got released, likely in the San Marcos River. The means of colonization is said to be vegetative propagation, which increases the likelihood of spread via fishing and boating gear. And like I was saying earlier, this is how they spread. People are, maybe lazy. Maybe they just don't think it's a big deal to have these plants still on their boats, on their fishing gear. But then they go to a different lake and fish and boat there. And then bang, that's how it's going to happen. Vegetative propagation, really just going to be quick spread. These plants most of them can double in size in 2 weeks. So, I mean, they're just really growing fast. The discussion and conclusion of this article comes to a concise realization that the invasive plant is spreading from its last known environments, and there are likely many more smaller clusters of this invasive species across Texas waterways. So really, it was a simple study, but they just looked at where they were before, looked at where they are now, and it came to the conclusion that these are spreading and just drawing attention to the fact that they need to be stopped, really. Um, so this is just some evidence that was included in the article. It's a map of Texas. Previous known locations were Hayes, Como, and Valverde County. These are by the white triangles right here, white triangles. The article states discovery of new populations in Travis, Kendall, and Bexar, thus proving a significant spread. So right here, the green triangles, Kendall, Bexar, Travis. So that's just a little chart that I had. Here's another one. It's a little bit wider scale so we can see. And I just notice the connection between the river systems. So previously known counties are in gray, right? But if you notice the red ones, the recently verified counties, and these are all clustered around this previously known county. So just the river systems connected, spreading. Likely people were going boating on these different rivers, and they spread this plant without even knowing or caring. But if you look at the rivers in Texas, like it could easily just keep going if we don't stop. So it's definitely a big problem. It needs to be handled. So that's my peer review research. And back to a broad understanding. What does this tell us about nuisance invasive aquatic species? If they're not controlled, their spread in Texas waterways is all but inevitable. Reproduction happens fast. Human activities provide ample transport. So without any prevention methods, it's easy for them. They reproduce fast, and we transport them. So it's just going to keep going. The problem is a very real and ongoing one. Hygrophila polysperma was not among TPWD's list of top threats, and yet it is also spreading rapidly and causing harm to aquatic life. So, it's a broad issue, and there's lots of plants that partake in this issue. So, and it's going on right now, so it's a big deal. This problem is not without many combatants. So this is the encouraging part. Even the research article from the Botanical Institute of Texas reveals the aquatic invasive species are not flying under the radar, and their threat to our environmental and economic health is not recognized. So people are studying this. People are preventing this. They understand how big of an issue it is. It's not just something that I just figured out and discovered. It's an issue that money is going into it, and people are fighting back against it. So that's encouraging. So current status of the issue. This is a very much an ongoing issue, as I was just saying. However, great effort is going into resolving the issue, like I was just saying. So, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department reports the following as of 2021. Over 50 bodies of water have been managed, over 18,000 acres of giant salvinia treated, over 3,100 acres of water hyacinth treated, and nearly 1,000 acres of other species treated. So this also gives us a little insight to what they really think is the biggest problem, as we see salvinia is. But that's a lot of work done. 18,000 acres, 3,000 acres, 1,000 acres. That's a lot of work done by the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. So, furthermore, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department has garnered state funds through the State Aquatic Vegetation Plan. This is, put into action by the state government, the Secretary of State. So, what it does is coordination, oversight, guidance, and enforcement of all activities related to the management of nuisance aquatic vegetation. So really just all things pertaining to this, they are giving money, funding, and the green light to the TPWD. So use of aquatic herbicide in line with rates approved by the EPA and requirements under the Clean Water Act. We learned about this in class, Environmental Protection Agency, lots of regulations because they don't want, bad chemicals in the water and such. or in the air, and then Clean Water Act is, same idea. So, you don't want to add chemicals into water that just makes a bigger problem. Is basically what that's saying. So gaining control. This is all from Texas Parks and Wildlife as well, and it's really just how do we control these species. So there's 4 different methods that they go about, and that we can also kind of partake in. I'm gonna draw some water real quick. So we have mechanical control, which is drag lines, cutters, rakes, booms. They don't require chemicals, but they are usually costly, labor intensive. So they're going to really put like these nets in, these drag lines, and they're going to try to prevent the plants from growing above the water like they do, basically like putting a carpet to stop the carpet of plants. But this could even harm fish, I think, as well. And it's costly and labor intensive. So I don't think this is the best option, but it is an option that is employed. Then we have environmental control. This is where we actually reshape the shoreline to reduce shallow water, because shallow water is where the plants grow mainly, and reducing the shoreline actually stop this plant growth before it even starts, which is interesting. Lowering water in winter to allow plants to freeze. So the plant's already growing, we lower the water level, they freeze and they die off, which is also environmental control. We can also use dye to reduce sunlight to plants and starve them. This would pertain more, I would say, to plants under the water, so the sun cannot get into them. And then we can also fertilize, but you got to be careful because fertilizer, as we know, can lead to algal blooms, which is another problem. So biological control: stalking, sterile, triploid, grass carp. So this is a fish that eats these plants and many other plants, and just really is the best main biological control. The problem is they're known to eat 50 to 300% of their body weight a day. They'll likely eat all the vegetation in the lake. So if you want any vegetation, you probably don't want to put these carp in there, but they will get rid of the problem. So, and then a permit is required. And obviously, because you can't just put fish in a lake without a permit and such, but that is an option and a very employed one. Chemical control: herbicides containing copper are used to kill off plant species. Best when plants are actively growing. Don't apply on cloudy days because oxygen depletion can happen. And you must check Texas Department of Agricultural laws before using any herbicide. So herbicide, it's an effective method, but it's also a dangerous method. You get in control with the EPA, with the Clean Water Act. You don't want to mess up with this one. So, we really just got to pick which one you want to do. But there's really a lot of good ways to limit the spread of these invasive species, which is encouraging, honestly. So the next steps. The exciting thing about this issue, as I was talking about earlier, is it's already being combated against, and we can be a part of it. Well, really, we already are a part of it. Is the interesting thing. Like, as residents of Texas, we are the ones that made this happen for the most part. We increase the spread, and so we can also be a part of reversing the spread and creating healthy recreational and environmental spaces. We really get to be a part of reversing what we were a part of. Maybe not as personally, but as the residents of Texas. So individuals are a huge part of solving this issue, as I was saying. Think of recycling. All the infrastructure is worthless if people don't participate, right? Or you can have every single recycling infrastructure in place, but if people aren't recycling, it doesn't matter. So it's the same kind of idea with this. The simplest way we can help is by cleaning off boats or any aquatic vehicles after visiting a lake to ensure we do not spread any vegetation. So take the time to spray down your boat after you get out of the water, or clean off your fishing tools when you get out of the water. That's really the best way that we can help before anything even happens, because that's preventative, right? But then if it does happen, if you own private land, Texas Parks and Wildlife states that control is up to the landowner. However, they have permits you must fill out to ensure you treat the species properly and legally. So, like I was saying earlier, they have infrastructure in place for this, but you're gonna have to go through the process. And I think private owned waters is really important because they can spread here too and then go from there to other places. So controlling on your own land is just as important as public land. Conclusion: all the research I did regarding nuisance aquatic vegetation had the same general principle. If controlled and contained, we could get rid of this problem, but if left alone, it will spread uncontrollably and continue to be detrimental to water systems across Texas. It's really in our hands, and it's also in the government's hands how much we want to fund it. But if you don't do anything, it's going to get worse. If you do something, it's going to get better. So pretty simple. If we don't continue to provide funding and awareness about invasive aquatic vegetation, many beloved waterways in Texas will become infested and unusable by the public, and unlivable for the fish and plants that want to dwell there. So it's really like a two-edged sword. it's going to affect us as people, and it's going to affect the fish and plant life as well. The Texas Parks Wildlife Department states that eradication is not necessarily the goal, as this would be near impossible. So if we continue to public and private waters, this environmental issue will be safely kept at bay. So they're not trying to get rid of all of these plants. It's not really possible. It's not really necessary. They're just trying to manage them because, like I said earlier, vegetation is not necessarily a problem, but the overabundance of vegetation is a huge problem. Here's my reference page. Just my citing my sources. First one is the book that we read. Second one, Texas Parks Wildlife website. This is actually Secretary of State's website where I got the article from, or the not the article, but the information on the plan that she passed, and then the peer review article here from the Botanical Research Institute of Texas. And yeah, that's everything I have. I don't know if I sped through that, but it was actually really fun to get to learn more about these, just something so close to home that's actually affecting, the environment and us as people. So it was actually really cool to get to do that. But anyways, you probably heard enough of me talking, so I'll get off of this.